Hi, I'm Morgan Borysewicz, and this is my coaching toolbox. Huber had many things that I would like to apply to my personal coaching practice in his book, Applying Educational Psychology and Coaching Athletes. But below are my top 10 things that I would like to add to my personal coaching toolbox. So, from chapter one, The Unstoppable Athlete, as a coach, you are one of the biggest motivators for your athletes. And I think this is an important reminder. Using positive reinforcement, creating a positive environment where players can learn skills but also have fun. And ultimately, you are the role model that players will imitate. So, it is important, and your role is important to motivate your players to become those unstoppable athletes. From chapter two, The Resilient Athlete, I believe that this tool to encourage your athletes to take personal responsibility is very important, especially when you're developing young athletes. I think it's an important tool or an important reminder to start developing in them when they're young. So help your players learn personal responsibility. If players believe that their training and the outcomes that they see from their training are within their control, they'll start to realize that their success and their failures are also in their control. And that's a really important skill for athletes to take into their sport as they continue on. From chapter three, The Salivating Athlete, help athletes learn to love what they do. For me personally, I coach middle school volleyball, and for most of my players, it is their first time with the sport. So I believe that this one is really important to help these athletes and these players just love the sport. And I can do this by creating positive environments and experiences within the sport to condition their emotions, desires, and motivation. So if this is their first experience, I need to make it a positive one so they will love the sport forever. And when they love something, they're going to be more likely to learn and play and work hard. And that's what we want out of all of our athletes. All right, from chapter four, The Athlete in the Skinner Box, what I want to add to my personal coaching practice is that the coach is the most powerful dispenser of childhood reinforcement. So again, it's very important to give positive reinforcement as a coach, especially when working with young athletes. So I want to make sure that I can focus on acknowledging hard work and offer compliments. Also, again, going back to that, creating a positive practice environment that's going to reinforce those positive associations with the sport for your athlete. From chapter five, The Imitating Athlete, observational learning occurs naturally, whether you want it to or not. I think that's super important to remember as a coach. Players are watching what you do, players are watching what other players do and how you react. And that's whether you want them to or not. So we have to be, as coaches, we have to be very mindful of that. And we have to set those positive examples for players to imitate. We need to encourage positive behaviors when we see them in other athletes and praise athletes when they imitate those positive behaviors. So we need to make sure that we are aware of what's going on, and we're always being intentional in what we show our players. From chapter seven, The Expert Athlete. So as a coach, the first priority is to hook your athletes on the sport. Again, this is so important, especially for those coaches of young athletes like myself. Players need to have fun, and it's okay for them to have fun. It's just a game. Players can learn important skills while still having fun. So focus again on that positive practice environment, which includes deliberate play for young athletes. That's going to be more important than the deliberate practice model. So give them positive things to associate with the sport so they'll work harder for that sport in the end. From chapter eight, this was probably my favorite chapter, The Fully Human Athlete. The development of a person positively correlates with the development of an athlete. So this one is so important as coaches. I think sometimes we get wrapped up in games and certain skills that players need to learn, or different models that they need to learn, whatever about the sport specifically. But it's really important to develop your players as people. And I think back to some of my favorite coaches and ones that have had the biggest impact on me. And that's because they really took time to get to know their players, and they really helped us become better people and not just better athletes. So your job as a coach isn't only developing athletes. Players are people, and how you develop them as a person relates with their development of an athlete. The best coaches see the players for more than what they do at practice. So invest time in your players, get to know them, support their other interests. That's so big for us at the middle school level, because chances are they won't play volleyball in college at that point. So support their other interests, find out what they like to do outside of the sport, really get to know your athletes. From chapter 9, the emotional athlete, the coach is the emotional leader of the team. I think sometimes that this is hard for coaches to remember, especially in those high intensity games and things like that. But you are the leader of the team. It goes back to the one a few slides before about how players are watching, always watching and imitating what you do. So set the example for your athletes to follow. It's important to remember you're the adult. You're the coach, you're the leader. So when it looks like the ship might go down, remain calm and steadfast at the helm. I loved that quote from Huber. And just a reminder that you are the leader, and they're going to feed off of your emotions. So make sure it's what you want to give them. Chapter 10, the principled coach. It's important to care for your athletes and to use humor. I love this one. It's okay to have fun. And I think, again, for young athletes specifically, it's okay to have fun, and it's okay for them to see you as a person and not just a super strict coach. Athletes can still learn skills while they're having fun. And overall, the biggest thing is your athletes need to know that you care about them. And sometimes that's by letting your guard down. I think of videos of Roy Williams after his Carolina basketball team would win. He would go in the locker room and dance and celebrate with them. And obviously he was a great coach, and his players respected him and played hard, but they still saw he was a person too, and he liked to have fun. And I think that really built their respect for Coach Williams. And I'm sure that meant a lot to his athletes, and that's not something that they'll forget quickly. All right, and the last tool that I want to add to my toolbox is just to have a coaching philosophy. And that sounds really simple, but great teams don't form on accident, and neither do great coaches. So having a personal coaching philosophy, really being intentional about what you want to do for the season. You need to have a plan of how you're going to run your team. How are you going to run your practices? How are you going to get to know your players? And how are you going to build that positive practice environment and to let them have fun? So I think this one is a really good reminder that just because you played a sport well doesn't mean you're a great coach. And that great coaches really takes practice and thought. And it goes back to being intentional with how you run your team. So these tools are all molding my personal coaching philosophy, and it's given me a lot to think about. Luckily, I'm pretty new in my coaching career, and so I'm